The snowflakes fell thick as cotton batting on that bitter February evening in 1876, and Olivia Jensen watched through the frost-etched window as her stepfather counted the money for the third time, his yellowed fingers trembling not from cold but from greed. She had known this moment would come eventually, ever since her mother died 6 months ago and left her alone with a man who saw her as nothing more than collateral for his gambling debts. The saloon below their cramped rooms above the general store in Wheatland, Wyoming, echoed with raucous laughter. But Olivia felt only the hollow ache of betrayal as Marcus Grady, the man who had promised to give her a respectable position as a housekeeper, leered at her with eyes that held no such innocent intentions. "Come along now, girl," her stepfather said, his voice rough from whiskey. "Mr. Grady here has paid good money, and you will go with him without making a fuss." Olivia's hands clenched in the worn fabric of her gray wool dress, the only decent garment she owned. She was 20 years old, and in all those years she had never imagined her life would come to this. Her mother had married Harold Jensen when Olivia was 15, desperate for security after Olivia's father died in a mining accident. Harold had seemed kind enough then, but grief and alcohol had transformed him into someone unrecognizable. "I will not go," Olivia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You have no right to sell me like livestock." "I have every right," Harold spat. "You have eaten my food and slept under my roof. This is how you will repay that debt." Marcus Grady stepped forward, his bulk blocking the doorway. He was a man in his 50s with a reputation that made decent women cross the street to avoid him. He owned a ranch 15 miles north of town, and the whispers said his last 3 housekeepers had all fled in the middle of the night, though none would speak of what had driven them away. "Now, Miss Jensen," Grady said, his voice oily with false kindness, "there is no need for theatrics. You will find I am a generous employer to those who please me." The way he said the word please made Olivia's stomach turn. She looked at the window, calculating whether she could survive a jump from the 2nd story. The snowstorm had intensified, and the street below was nearly invisible through the white curtain of falling snow. She would freeze to death within an hour if she ran with no coat, no money, and nowhere to go. "I need to fetch my things," Olivia said, her mind racing for any possible escape. "You will need nothing but what I provide," Grady said, reaching for her arm. The door to the room burst open with such force that it struck the wall and bounced back. A man stood in the doorway, snow dusting the broad shoulders of his sheepskin coat, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He was tall and lean, with the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. As he pushed his hat back, Olivia saw a face that was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with sharp blue eyes that took in the scene with quick intelligence. "Evening, gentlemen," the stranger said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that immediately shifted the energy in the room. "I am looking for Harold Jensen. I was told I could find him here." Harold's face went pale, and Olivia noticed her stepfather's hand move instinctively toward his chest pocket where he had just tucked the money from Grady. "Who the hell are you?" Harold demanded, though his voice lacked conviction. "Name is Tobias Zachary," the man said, stepping fully into the room and closing the door behind him. "You owe my father money, quite a bit of money actually, $300 to be exact, from a poker game in Cheyenne last October." Olivia watched as Harold's face went from pale to ashen. $300 was a fortune, more than most men in Wyoming earned in a year of hard labor. "I do not know what you are talking about," Harold said, but his hand tightened protectively over his pocket. Tobias Zachary's expression did not change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "My father died 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia took him fast. Before he passed, he told me about several outstanding debts owed to him. Yours was the largest. Now, I am a reasonable man, Mr. Jensen. I know $300 is not easily come by. But I also know you just accepted payment from Mr. Grady here." He nodded toward the other man without taking his eyes off Harold. Word travels fast in a town this size, even during a snowstorm. Marcus Grady shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence evaporating. "This is none of your concern, Zachary. This is a private transaction." "I would say it becomes my concern when the money being exchanged rightfully belongs to my family," Tobias replied. His gaze finally moved to Olivia, and she saw something in his expression change, a flicker of recognition or perhaps understanding. "What exactly is the nature of this transaction?" "I am selling my stepdaughter's services as a housekeeper," Harold said quickly. "It is a fair exchange and legal." "Is it?" Tobias asked, and now he was looking directly at Olivia. "Miss, are you entering this arrangement of your own free will?" Olivia's breath caught in her throat. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance. "No," she said, her voice clear and firm despite her fear. "I am not. He is selling me to pay his gambling debts, and Mr. Grady has no intention of employing me as a housekeeper." The room fell silent except for the howl of wind against the window. Marcus Grady's face flushed an ugly red. "That is slander. You lying little watch your mouth," Tobias said, and though his voice remained quiet, it carried a note of steel that made Grady snap his jaw shut. Tobias looked at Harold. "So you are not just a cheat and a debtor, you are a slaver as well." "I wonder what Sheriff Morrison would have to say about that." "You cannot prove anything," Harold said, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. "I have her word, and I have my eyes," Tobias said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "Here is what I am going to do. The money Grady gave you that is going to pay part of your debt to my father's estate. Hand it over." "Now wait just a minute," Grady started. "You will be compensated," Tobias said shortly. "How much did you pay?" Grady's mouth worked silently for a moment before he muttered, 150. Tobias's jaw tightened, and Olivia saw disgust flash across his face. $150 for a human being. He turned back to Harold. "Give him back his money. Now." Harold's hands shook as he pulled the bills from his pocket and thrust them at Grady, who snatched them back with ill grace. Tobias counted out bills from his own envelope, his movements precise and controlled. "This is $200, Tobias said, holding the money where Harold could see it but not reach it. "It does not cover your entire debt, but it is all I have with me at the moment. You will consider this payment in full and sign a document to that effect." "That is not enough," Harold protested weakly. "It is more than you deserve, and far more than you will get from any court given what I have witnessed here tonight," Tobias said. "You will take this money, you will sign the paper, and you will relinquish any legal claim to Miss Jensen. Then you will get out of Wheatland and never return. Because if I see you again, or if I hear that you have bothered this young woman in any way, I will make sure every marshal and sheriff between here and the Colorado border knows exactly what kind of man you are." The threat hung in the air, undeniable and absolute. Harold looked at the money, then at Tobias's face, and seemed to realize he had no choice. He nodded jerkily. Tobias pulled a paper from his coat, already prepared. "This states that Harold Jensen releases all legal guardianship and authority over Olivia Jensen in exchange for payment of debt. Sign here." Harold scrawled his name with a shaking hand. Tobias handed him the money, and Harold grabbed it and pushed past them out the door, disappearing down the stairs without a backward glance. Marcus Grady lingered a moment longer, his face dark with anger. "You have made an enemy tonight, Zachary," he said. "I will sleep just fine," Tobias replied. "Leave." Grady left, his heavy footsteps echoing on the stairs. Olivia found herself alone with this stranger who had just upended her entire world. She realized she was shaking, whether from cold or shock she could not tell. Tobias turned to her and his expression softened slightly. "You should sit down, Miss Jensen. You look like you are about to fall over." Olivia sank onto the single rickety chair in the room, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "You do not even know me." "I do not abide men who treat women like property," Tobias said simply. He moved to the small stove in the corner and added wood from the nearly empty box beside it. "My father was not a perfect man, but he taught me that much. Besides, Harold did owe him money, though I will admit the debt was closer to $100 than 300. Despite everything, Olivia felt a surprised laugh bubble up in her throat. "You lied." "I exaggerated," Tobias corrected, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "There is a difference, and given what I walked into, I would say it was justified." The smile faded as he looked at her more seriously. "Miss Jensen, I need to be clear about something. You are free now. You owe me nothing. I do not expect anything from you in return for what just happened." Olivia looked down at her hands, trying to process the sudden reversal of her fate. "I have nowhere to go," she said quietly. "No money, no family left. Harold was not much, but he was all I had after my mother died." "Do you have any skills?" Tobias asked. "Any trade?" "I can cook, clean, so," Olivia said. "I can read and write and do sums. My mother made sure I had an education back when my real father was alive. We had a small farm in Nebraska before he died." Tobias was quiet for a moment, and Olivia could see him thinking. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the fire in the stove. "This storm is getting worse," Tobias said. "The stage will not run again for days, and the trains will not go through until the snow clears. I need to get back to my ranch, but it is not safe to travel tonight." He pulled off his hat and ran a hand through dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "I have a room at the boarding house down the street. You can stay here tonight if you prefer, or there is a room available next to mine. The proprietress is a respectable widow named Mrs. Hannigan. You would be safe there." Olivia looked around the cold, cramped room that had been her prison. The thought of spending another night here made her feel ill. "I will come with you if you do not mind." "I do not want to stay here another moment." "Do you have a coat?" Tobias asked, looking at her thin dress. "No," Olivia admitted. "Harold sold my winter coat last month for drinking money." Tobias's expression darkened, but he only nodded and removed his sheepskin coat, draping it over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm, and it carried the scent of leather and pine and something else, something clean and masculine that made Olivia feel oddly safe. "But you will freeze," she protested. "I have been colder," Tobias said. He pulled a thick wool scarf from his pocket and wrapped it around his neck. "It is not far. Come on." They descended the stairs together, Tobias keeping himself between Olivia and the rowdy crowd in the saloon. Several men turned to look at them, but something in Tobias's bearing made them look away again quickly. Outside, the snow was coming down so thick that Olivia could barely see 3 feet ahead. Tobias took her arm, his grip firm but not constraining, and guided her down the street. The boarding house was blessedly close, a neat 2-story building with warm light glowing in the windows. Tobias pushed open the door, and they stumbled into the warmth of the entrance hall. A woman in her 60s appeared from a side room, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mr. Zachary, you are back," she said, then her eyes widened as she saw Olivia. "Goodness, child, you are frozen through. Come by the fire immediately." Within minutes, Olivia found herself seated by a roaring fire in Mrs. Hannigan's private sitting room, wrapped in blankets and with a cup of hot tea in her hands. Tobias stood near the window, looking out at the storm, while Mrs. Hannigan fussed over Olivia like a mother hen. "What happened to your coat, dear?" Mrs. Hannigan asked, her sharp eyes taking in Olivia's worn dress and thin shoes. Tobias turned from the window. "Mrs. Hannigan, this is Miss Olivia Jensen. She has had a difficult evening. I was hoping you might have a room available for her." Mrs. Hannigan looked between them, and Olivia could see the older woman's mind working. "I see," she said carefully. "And how does Miss Jensen know you, Mr. Zachary?" "He saved me," Olivia said before Tobias could answer. The words came out raw and honest. "My stepfather was selling me to Marcus Grady." Mr. Zachary stopped him. Mrs. Hannigan's face went still, and then her expression hardened into something fierce. "Marcus Grady," she said, and the name was a curse. "That devil. My niece worked for him 2 years ago. She never told me exactly what happened, but she wakes screaming from nightmares still." She reached out and took Olivia's hand. "You poor child. Of course you can stay here. I have a room upstairs, small but clean. You can stay as long as you need." "I do not have money to pay you," Olivia said, her voice catching. "We will work something out," Mrs. Hannigan said firmly. "I could use help with the cooking and cleaning if you are willing to work. Room and board in exchange for labor. Does that sound fair?" It sounded like salvation. Olivia nodded, not trusting herself to speak around the lump in her throat. Mrs. Hannigan patted her hand and stood. "I will get the room ready and find you some proper clothes. My daughter left several dresses here when she married and moved to Denver. You look about her size." She bustled out, leaving Olivia and Tobias alone. Tobias came and sat in the chair Mrs. Hannigan had vacated. Up close, Olivia could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He had been traveling in this storm, and now he had taken on her problems as his own. "Thank you," Olivia said softly. "I do not know how I will ever repay you for what you did tonight." "I told you you owe me nothing," Tobias said. "I did what any decent man would do." "But most men are not decent," Olivia replied. "Not in my experience." Tobias was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry for that," he said finally. "I am sorry you have had reason to learn that lesson." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Olivia studied Tobias's face in the firelight, noting the strong jaw, the straight nose, the eyes that seemed both kind and haunted. "You said your father died 3 weeks ago," she said. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Tobias said. "He was sick for a while, so it was not unexpected. But it is strange, being suddenly alone in the world." "I understand that feeling," Olivia said. "My mother died 6 months ago. She was all I had left of my real family." "Your real father, the one who died in the mining accident," Tobias said. "Did you love him?" "Very much," Olivia said, surprised by the question. "He was a good man, kind and patient. He used to read to me every night, even after a long day working the farm. He had a beautiful voice." She smiled at the memory. "When he died, something in my mother broke. She married Harold within 6 months, and I think she regretted it almost immediately. But by then it was too late. People do foolish things when they are grieving and afraid," Tobias said. "Is that why you came to collect your father's debts?" Olivia asked. "Are you grieving and afraid?" Tobias looked at her sharply, then his expression softened into something like respect. "You are perceptive," he said. "Yes, I suppose I am. My father left me the ranch, but he also left me his debts. More debts than assets, if I am being honest. I have been traveling for 2 weeks, trying to collect what was owed to him so I can pay what he owed to others. If I cannot make the numbers work, I will lose the ranch." "How much do you need?" Olivia asked. "More than I am likely to get," Tobias said with a rueful smile. "But I am not giving up yet. The ranch has been in my family for 20 years. My father built it from nothing. I owe it to him to fight for it." Mrs. Hannigan returned then, announcing that the room was ready. She led Olivia upstairs to a small but immaculately clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the snow-covered street. She laid out a nightgown and several dresses on the bed. "The privy is out back, but there is a chamber pot under the bed," Mrs. Hannigan said. "Breakfast is at 7. Sleep well, dear." After she left, Olivia changed into the nightgown and climbed into bed. The sheets were cold but clean, and for the first time in months she felt safe. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Tobias Zachary's blue eyes and the quiet strength in his voice when he told her she was free. The next morning, Olivia woke to find the storm had blown itself out overnight. The world outside her window was transformed into a wonderland of white, with snow drifted high against buildings and hanging heavy on the bare branches of trees. She dressed in one of the borrowed dresses, a simple blue calico that fit reasonably well, and made her way downstairs. Mrs. Hannigan was in the kitchen, and Olivia immediately set about helping with breakfast. The older woman protested at first, but Olivia insisted, and soon they were working together with the easy rhythm of practiced cooks. When the meal was ready, they carried platters of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy into the dining room where several boarders were already seated. Tobias was among them, looking refreshed despite the previous night's drama. His eyes found Olivia immediately, and he gave her a small nod of greeting. She felt her cheeks warm under his gaze and busied herself pouring coffee. After breakfast, Tobias approached her as she was clearing dishes. "Miss Jensen, might I have a word with you?" They stepped into the empty sitting room, and Tobias closed the door behind them. "I have been thinking about your situation," he said without preamble. "You have a place to stay here, which is good. But Mrs. Hannigan cannot afford to keep you indefinitely without proper payment, and working as a general helper will not give you much in the way of prospects for the future." "I know," Olivia said quietly. "But what choice do I have? I cannot go back to Harold even if he has not left town yet, and I have no other family, no references that would help me find decent employment." "There is another option," Tobias said, and something in his tone made Olivia look up sharply. "It is not a perfect solution, and I want you to know you are under no obligation to agree, but I think it might work for both of us." "What option?" Olivia asked warily. Tobias took a deep breath. "Marry me." Olivia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I know it sounds insane," Tobias said quickly. "We have known each other less than 12 hours. But hear me out. I need help at the ranch. My father had a housekeeper, but she left after he died, and I cannot run the place alone. I need someone who can cook and manage the household while I work the land and tend the cattle. You need security and a future. Marriage would give us both what we need." "That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard," Olivia said, but her heart was pounding. "You cannot just marry someone you do not know. People do it all the time," Tobias countered. "There are mail-order brides coming west every day to marry men they have never met. At least we have met. At least we have talked." "For one evening," Olivia said. "Which is more than many couples have before they marry," Tobias said. "Look, I am not talking about a real marriage. Not at first, anyway. We would marry legally for practical purposes. You would have my name and my protection. You would have a home and work that pays more than scraps and hand-me-downs. In exchange, you would help me keep the ranch running. We would be partners, not husband and wife in the romantic sense. You would have your own room, your own space. No expectations beyond what we agreed to. Olivia turned away from him, her mind reeling. It was completely mad. And yet, what were her alternatives? She could stay here and work for Mrs. Hannigan, always one step away from poverty. She could try to find other work in Wheatland, but in a town this small, her reputation would be ruined by her association with Harold and the events of last night. Word traveled fast and people would assume the worst. "Why would you do this?" she asked, not looking at him. "You do not love me. You do not even know me." "No," Tobias agreed. "But I respect you. I saw how you stood up to Harold and Grady last night, even though you were terrified. You have courage and you have dignity. Those are qualities I value, and if I am being completely honest, having a wife would help my situation. The bank is more likely to extend credit to a married man, someone who looks settled and stable. Right now, I am just a bachelor trying to hold onto a failing ranch. A wife changes that perception." Olivia turned back to face him. "So I would be a business arrangement." "We would both be a business arrangement," Tobias corrected. "I am not pretending this is a fairy tale. I am offering you a partnership based on mutual benefit and, I hope, mutual respect. If over time we come to care for each other, well, that would be a bonus. If not, we would still have a workable situation." "And if I wanted to leave?" Olivia asked. "Then you could leave," Tobias said. "I would not hold you against your will. I would never do that to anyone." Olivia believed him. She did not know why, but she did. There was something fundamentally honest about Tobias Zachary, something that made her trust him despite the insanity of what he was proposing. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course," Tobias said. "I was planning to stay in town for another day or two anyway, to give the roads time to clear and to pick up supplies. Take whatever time you need." But Olivia found she did not need much time. She spent the day helping Mrs. Hannigan with the boarding house, washing linens and preparing meals, and with each task she thought about the future. She thought about growing old in this boarding house, or one like it, always working for someone else, always dependent on the charity of others. She thought about the alternative Tobias was offering, a home of her own, work that mattered, partnership with a man who had already proven he would protect her. That evening, she found Tobias in the sitting room, reading a newspaper by lamplight. He looked up as she entered and set the paper aside. "I will marry you," Olivia said without preamble. "On one condition." Tobias stood, his expression carefully neutral. "What condition?" "That you promise me honesty," Olivia said. "Always. No matter how difficult the truth might be, I have had enough of men who lie and deceive. If we are going to be partners, I need to know I can trust your word." "You have my promise," Tobias said solemnly. "I will always tell you the truth, even when it is hard." "Then yes," Olivia said, "I will marry you." They were married 2 days later by the circuit judge who happened to be in Wheatland settling a land dispute. Mrs. Hannigan served as witness, along with the local banker, a jovial man named Samuel Porter, who seemed delighted by the romantic notion of a whirlwind courtship. Olivia wore a dress that Mrs. Hannigan had altered for her, a soft green wool that brought out the color of her hazel eyes. Tobias wore his best suit, and when he took her hand to slide a simple gold band onto her finger, Olivia felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with practicality. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Judge Morrison said, beaming at them. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Zachary." Tobias hesitated, his eyes meeting Olivia's in question. She gave a tiny nod and he leaned down and kissed her softly, briefly. It was nothing more than a brush of lips, but Olivia felt it all the way to her toes. They left Wheatland the next morning in a wagon loaded with supplies. Tobias had used the last of his ready money to buy staples that would see them through the rest of winter: flour, sugar, coffee, salt pork, dried beans. Olivia sat beside him on the wagon seat, wrapped in a new coat that Tobias had insisted on buying despite her protests about the cost. "You cannot work on the ranch if you freeze to death," he had said reasonably, and that had been that. The journey to the ranch took most of the day. The roads were rough, still clogged with snow in places, and the wagon moved slowly. Tobias pointed out landmarks as they traveled. A distinctive rock formation that looked like a sleeping bear, a creek that would swell with snowmelt in spring, a stand of cottonwoods that marked the edge of his property. "The ranch is about 300 acres, Tobias explained. "Not huge, but big enough. We run about 60 head of cattle right now, though we should have twice that for the land to be really profitable. My father had to sell off stock to pay debts over the last few years." "What kind of debts?" Olivia asked. Tobias's jaw tightened. "Medical debts mostly. He was sick for a long time before he finally died. Doctors are not cheap, and neither are medicines. He kept hoping he would recover and be able to work again, so he kept spending money on treatments. By the time he accepted that he was dying, he had burned through most of the ranch's reserves." "I am sorry," Olivia said softly. "So am I," Tobias replied. "But feeling sorry does not pay the bills or feed the cattle. We have to work with what we have." As the sun was beginning to set, they crested a hill, and Olivia saw the ranch spread out below them. The house was a simple structure, wood framed with a stone chimney, larger than a cabin but not grand by any means. There was a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Olivia saw a figure emerge from the barn. "That is Juan," Tobias said. "He and his wife Rosa have been working for my family for 10 years. They stayed on after my father died, even though I could not pay them properly. I owe them more than I can say." As they pulled up to the house, Juan came forward to take the horse's reins. He was a man in his 40s with dark hair shot through with gray and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Welcome back, Tobias," he said. Then his eyes widened as he saw Olivia. "And who is this?" "This is Olivia," Tobias said, climbing down from the wagon and then turning to help Olivia down. His hands were strong and steady at her waist. "My wife." Juan's eyebrows shot up, but then his face split into a wide grin. "Your wife. This is wonderful news. Rosa will be so happy." Come, come. You must be frozen. Rosa has stew on the stove." They entered the house into a large main room that served as both kitchen and living space. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the air was warm and smelled of cooking meat and herbs. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She was round and cheerful-looking, with dark hair pulled back in a braid and a smile that could light up a room. "Tobias, you are back," she said, then stopped as she saw Olivia. "Oh, you have brought a guest." "Not a guest," Tobias said. "Rosa, Juan, this is Olivia Jensen. Olivia Zachary now. We were married 3 days ago." Rosa's hands flew to her mouth, and then she was rushing forward and pulling Olivia into a hug that smelled of cinnamon and soap. "Married." "Tobias, you sly thing, you did not tell us you were courting anyone." "Oh, this is wonderful, just wonderful. A bride. The house needs a woman's touch again." Over Rosa's shoulder, Olivia caught Tobias's eye. He looked slightly embarrassed by Rosa's enthusiasm, but also pleased. When Rosa finally released her, Juan came forward and shook Olivia's hand with grave courtesy. "Welcome to the family, Senora," he said. "We are very glad you are here." That night, after a hearty meal and much excited chatter from Rosa about wedding celebrations and fixing up the house, Tobias showed Olivia to her room. It was at the back of the house, small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the snowy fields. "I am across the hall," Tobias said, standing in the doorway. If you need anything in the night, just knock." "Thank you," Olivia said. The day had been long and overwhelming, and she was suddenly exhausted. "Tobias, about what you told Rosa and Juan about us being married. What about it?" Tobias asked. "Do they know this is just a business arrangement?" Olivia asked. Tobias was quiet for a moment. "I did not tell them that, no. As far as they are concerned, we are a normal married couple. Is that a problem?" "I suppose not," Olivia said slowly. "It just feels like lying." "We are married," Tobias pointed out. "That is not a lie. The rest is just private business between us. Rosa and Juan do not need to know the details of our arrangement." He was right, of course. And yet, Olivia felt a strange pang at the idea of maintaining the pretense of a real marriage while knowing that it was nothing more than a practical arrangement. She pushed the feeling aside. She had made her choice, and she would live with it. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Olivia woke before dawn each morning and worked alongside Rosa, learning the routines of the ranch. There was always work to be done. Bread to be baked, clothes to be washed, meals to be prepared, chickens to be fed, eggs to be gathered. Olivia threw herself into the work with determination, eager to prove her worth. Tobias and Juan spent long days tending the cattle, repairing fences damaged by winter storms, and cutting wood. Tobias would come in each evening exhausted and half frozen, but he always had a kind word for Olivia, asking about her day and thanking her for the meal. They were unfailingly polite to each other, always courteous, always careful. And yet, Olivia found herself watching Tobias when she thought he was not looking. She noticed the way his hair curled at his neck when it got too long, the way his hands moved with careful precision whether he was mending a harness or holding a coffee cup, the rare smile that transformed his usually serious face into something almost boyish. One evening about 3 weeks after their arrival at the ranch, Olivia was washing dishes when Tobias came into the kitchen. Rosa and Juan had retired to their small cabin behind the main house, and Tobias and Olivia were alone. "Let me help you," Tobias said, picking up a dish towel. "You do not have to do that," Olivia protested. "You have been working all day." "So have you," Tobias pointed out. "Besides, I like doing dishes. It is one of the few jobs where you can see immediate results." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, and then Tobias said, "You have done a wonderful job here, Olivia. The house feels like a home again." "Thank you," Olivia said, pleased by the compliment. "Rosa has been very patient teaching me. I was not used to running a household this size." "You are a fast learner," Tobias said. He dried the last dish and set it on the shelf, then turned to face her. "I was thinking, we should go into town next week. There is a dance at the church hall, one of those social things that Mrs. Hannigan told me about. It might be good for us to be seen together, to help establish you as the new Mrs. Zachary." "A dance," Olivia repeated. She had not been to a dance since before her mother married Harold. The idea both excited and terrified her. "I do not know if I remember how to dance." "Neither do I," Tobias admitted with a sheepish smile. "We can fumble through it together." The night of the dance arrived with clear skies and temperatures just above freezing. Olivia wore the green dress she had been married in, the best she had, and Rosa helped her pin up her hair in a style that was both practical and pretty. When she came out into the main room, Tobias was waiting by the door in a clean shirt and his best vest. He looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered in his eyes that made Olivia's breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you," Olivia managed, feeling her cheeks warm. "You look very handsome yourself." The ride into Wheatland was cold but pleasant, with stars blazing overhead and the horse's breath steaming in the night air. When they arrived at the church hall, it was already full of people. Lanterns hung from the rafters, and a small group of musicians was playing a lively tune on fiddle, banjo, and guitar. Mrs. Hannigan spotted them immediately and came bustling over, beaming. "Olivia, Tobias, how wonderful to see you. Everyone has been so curious about the newlyweds." She was not exaggerating. Within minutes, Olivia found herself surrounded by women eager to meet the new bride. They asked polite questions about the wedding, about the ranch, about how she was settling in. Olivia answered as best she could, aware of being carefully evaluated. One woman stood slightly apart from the others, watching Olivia with cool appraisal. She was beautiful in a sharp-edged way, with pale blonde hair and blue eyes that held no warmth. When there was a break in the conversation, she stepped forward. "I am Vera Patterson," she said, extending a gloved hand. "I do not believe we have been properly introduced." "Olivia Zachary," Olivia replied, shaking the offered hand. Something about Vera's tone put her on guard. "Yes, I heard about your sudden marriage," Vera said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Quite romantic from what I understand, though I must say I was surprised. I had always thought Tobias would marry someone he had known for more than a few days." There was an awkward silence. Mrs. Hannigan opened her mouth to say something sharp, but Olivia spoke first. "When you meet the right person, timing becomes irrelevant," she said calmly. "Tobias and I knew very quickly that we belonged together." "How fortunate for you both," Vera said. "I do hope you will be very happy." Running a ranch is such hard work, especially for someone not raised to it, but I am sure Tobias will be patient with you as you learn. With that, she glided away, leaving Olivia feeling stung. Mrs. Hannigan patted her arm sympathetically. "Pay her no mind, dear," she said. Vera had her cap set for Tobias for years. She is just bitter that he married someone else. Before Olivia could respond, Tobias appeared at her elbow. "Dance with me," he asked, offering his hand. Olivia took it gratefully, and they moved onto the floor as the musicians started a waltz. Tobias's hand was warm at her waist, his other hand holding hers firmly. He moved with more grace than he had given himself credit for, guiding her smoothly through the steps. "I saw you talking to Vera Patterson," Tobias said as they turned. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing important," Olivia said, "just welcoming me to town." "Olivia," Tobias said, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Remember our promise, honesty always." Olivia sighed. "She implied that I was not good enough for you and that I did not know how to run a ranch. She also seems to think she would have been a better choice of wife." Tobias's jaw tightened. "Vera Patterson has been pursuing me since her husband died 5 years ago. I have never been interested. She is cold and calculating, and she sees marriage as nothing more than a business merger. I would rather be alone than tied to someone like that." "But is that not what we have?" Olivia asked quietly. "A business merger." Tobias looked down at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Is it?" he asked. "Because it has not felt that way to me, not for a while now." Before Olivia could respond, the music ended and another couple bumped into them, laughing and apologizing. The moment was broken, and Tobias stepped back. They spent the rest of the evening mingling with the townspeople, dancing a few more times, eating cake and drinking punch. It was late when they finally headed home, Olivia's feet aching and her head swimming with impressions and conversations. As they drove through the night, Tobias broke the comfortable silence. "I am sorry if tonight was difficult for you. Small towns can be judgmental about outsiders." "It was fine," Olivia said. "Most people were kind, and those who were not, well, their opinions do not matter to me." "Good," Tobias said. "Because you belong here now. You are part of this community, whether Vera Patterson likes it or not." The word belong resonated with Olivia. When had she last truly belonged anywhere? Not since her father died, certainly. And yet here, on this ranch with this quiet man beside her, she was beginning to feel something she had not felt in years. She was beginning to feel like she had come home. Winter gradually gave way to early spring. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth beneath, and the days grew incrementally longer and warmer. Olivia threw herself into preparing the vegetable garden, working alongside Rosa to turn the soil and plan what they would plant. Tobias and Juan began the hard work of spring calving, long nights spent in the barn making sure the cows and their newborn calves survived. One night in late March, Olivia woke to the sound of Tobias moving around in the main room. She pulled on a shawl and padded out to find him pulling on his coat, his hair standing up from being roused from sleep. "What is wrong?" she asked. "One of the cows is in trouble," Tobias said. "Juan just came to get me. The calf is breech and we need to turn it or we will lose them both." He paused. "Go back to bed. This is not something you need to be part of." "I want to help," Olivia said. "Tell me what to do." Tobias looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Get dressed warmly and meet me in the barn. Bring as many clean towels as you can find." 20 minutes later, Olivia was in the barn, watching as Tobias worked with calm efficiency to help the struggling cow. It was not pretty work, and more than once Olivia had to look away. But she stayed, handing Tobias whatever he needed, holding the lantern steady, murmuring soft encouragement to the frightened animal. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Tobias managed to turn the calf and pull it free. It lay still for a terrible moment, and then Tobias cleared its nose and mouth and it took a shuddering breath and let out a weak bleat. The cow, exhausted but alive, began to lick her baby clean. Tobias sat back on his heels, his shirt stained with blood and fluid, his face drawn with exhaustion. "We did it," he said, and he smiled at Olivia with such genuine joy that she felt her heart flip over in her chest. "You did it," Olivia corrected. "I just held the lantern." "You stayed," Tobias said. "A lot of people could not have done that, thank you." They walked back to the house together as the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. At the door, Tobias caught Olivia's hand. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I know when we married, we agreed this was just a practical arrangement, partnership, not romance. But Olivia, that has changed for me. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as my business partner and started thinking of you as my wife, my real wife." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "Tobias." "I am not asking you to feel the same way," Tobias said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I have feelings for you, Olivia. Real feelings. And if you do not share them, I will understand and I will not pressure you, but I could not keep pretending anymore." Olivia looked at this man who had saved her from a terrible fate, who had given her his name and his protection, who worked himself to exhaustion every day to keep the ranch running. She thought about how her heart lifted every morning when she heard his footsteps on the floor above her, how she found excuses to be in the same room with him, how the touch of his hand sent warmth flooding through her. "You are not alone in your feelings," she said softly. "I care for you too, Tobias, more than I expected to, more than I know how to express." The smile that spread across Tobias's face was like sunrise. He reached up and cupped her face gently in his rough, work-worn hands. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Not for show, not because anyone is watching, but because I want to." "Yes," Olivia whispered. This kiss was nothing like the brief, formal touch of lips at their wedding. This was deep and slow and searching, a kiss that spoke of longing and promise and the beginning of something real. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. "I think," Tobias said, his forehead resting against hers, "that we should probably talk about the sleeping arrangements." Olivia laughed, feeling giddy and nervous and happier than she had been in years. I think you are probably right. That night, Olivia moved her things into Tobias's room, and they began their marriage again, this time as true partners in every sense. The physical intimacy between them was new and sometimes awkward, but it was also sweet and tender, and it deepened the emotional bond that had been growing between them for months. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch began to show signs of recovery. The calves grew fat on rich grass. The garden produced abundantly, and Tobias was able to sell several head of cattle for a good price. He used the money to pay down some of his father's debts and to buy supplies for the coming winter. One hot July afternoon, Olivia was in the kitchen making jam from wild berries she and Rosa had picked when she heard the sound of horses approaching. She looked out the window and saw a group of riders, 5 men on horseback, riding up to the house. Something about the way they moved put her on edge. Tobias and Juan were in the near pasture, and Olivia could see them start toward the house when they noticed the visitors. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door. The leader of the group was a hard-faced man in his 50s, well-dressed but with cold eyes. "Good afternoon," he said, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I am looking for Tobias Zachary. He will be here in a moment," Olivia said. "May I tell him who is calling?" "Gerald Munro," the man said, "from the Wheatland Territorial Bank." Olivia's stomach sank. The bank. This could not be good news. She kept her face composed and offered the basic hospitality that Western custom demanded. "Would you like to come in out of the sun? I have lemonade." "That is kind of you, madam," Munro said, "but we will wait out here for Mr. Zachary." Tobias and Juan arrived a few minutes later, both breathing hard from running. Tobias's face was guarded as he looked at the visitors. "Mr. Munro," he said with a curt nod. "To what do I owe this visit?" "I will get straight to the point, Zachary," Munro said. "Your father owed the bank a substantial sum of money. We have been patient, given the circumstances, but our patience is not unlimited. The loan comes due at the end of August. That is 6 weeks from now. If you cannot pay the full amount, we will have no choice but to foreclose on the property." "How much?" Tobias asked, his voice tight. $1,200, Munro said. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. It was an impossible sum, more than most ranchers made in 2 years of good profits. "That is more than my father originally borrowed," Tobias said. "With interest over 5 years, yes," Munro agreed. "Your father made some payments, but not enough to keep up with the interest." "I am sorry, Zachary, but business is business." "I have been making payments," Tobias protested. "I sold cattle last month and brought you $300, which was appreciated but not sufficient," Munro said. "You need to come up with the full balance, or you will need to vacate the property by September 1st. He touched his hat again. "Good day, Mrs. Zachary. I truly am sorry." The men rode away, leaving Tobias standing in the yard looking stricken. Olivia went to him and took his hand. It was cold despite the summer heat. "We will find a way," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "How?" Tobias asked hoarsely. "Where am I supposed to get $1,200 in 6 weeks? We do not have that much money in livestock, even if I sold every head of cattle and both horses. The land itself is worth something, but not to me if the bank takes it." That night, they sat up late discussing options. They could try to get a loan from another bank, but without collateral, no one would lend them that kind of money. They could ask friends and neighbors for help, but most people in the area were barely scraping by themselves. They could sell off equipment and furniture, but that would not come close to raising the amount needed. "There has to be something we are missing," Olivia said, pacing the main room. "Some asset your father had that we do not know about." "I have been through all his papers," Tobias said wearily. "There is nothing. He spent everything trying to stay alive. Olivia stopped pacing and looked at her husband. In the lamplight, he looked older than his 26 years, worn down by worry and responsibility. She went to him and wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his shoulder. "We will not give up," she said fiercely. "This ranch is your home, your family's legacy. We will fight for it." Tobias covered her hands with his. "I do not know what I did to deserve you," he said quietly. "You saved my life," Olivia replied simply. "Now I am going to help you save yours." The next morning, Olivia rode into Wheatland with a plan forming in her mind. She went directly to Mrs. Hannigan's boarding house and found the older woman in her kitchen preparing lunch. "Olivia," Mrs. Hannigan exclaimed, wiping her hands and pulling Olivia into a hug. "What a wonderful surprise! How is married life treating you?" "Very well," Olivia said, returning the hug. "But I need your help, and I need you to be honest with me. You know everyone in this town. Who has money? Real money enough to make a large loan." Mrs. Hannigan's eyebrows rose. "You are in trouble." "The bank is foreclosing on the ranch," Olivia said bluntly. "We need $1,200 by the end of August, and we do not have it. I am looking for someone who might be willing to invest in the ranch, or extend us a private loan with better terms than the bank." Mrs. Hannigan was quiet for a long moment, her sharp mind working. "There is one person," she said finally. "Hiram Blackwell. He owns a big spread east of here, and he has more money than sense. But he is not known for his charity, Olivia. If he helps you, he will want something in return." "I will deal with that when I come to it," Olivia said. "Can you arrange an introduction?" "He comes into town on Saturdays for supplies," Mrs. Hannigan said. "I can make sure you run into him at the general store this weekend. But Olivia, be careful. Blackwell is a hard man." Saturday found Olivia at the general store, pretending to examine bolts of fabric while actually watching the door. When a large man in expensive clothes entered, followed by two ranch hands carrying empty supply sacks, Mrs. Hannigan caught Olivia's eye and nodded. This was Blackwell. Olivia took a deep breath and approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell. My name is Olivia Zachary. I wonder if I might have a word with you about a business proposition." Hiram Blackwell was a man in his 60s with iron gray hair and calculating eyes. He looked Olivia up and down, his expression neutral. "Business proposition from a young woman. This should be interesting." "Very well, Mrs. Zachary. You have 5 minutes." They stepped outside onto the wooden sidewalk, and Olivia laid out the situation as clearly and concisely as she could. She explained about the ranch, the debt, the foreclosure deadline. She explained that with more capital, the ranch could be profitable, that they had good land and good stock and knowledgeable people working it. "What you have," Blackwell said when she finished, "is a failing operation run by an inexperienced young man who inherited more problems than assets. Why would I throw good money after bad?" "Because Tobias is not his father," Olivia said firmly. "He is smart and he is a hard worker. Given a fair chance, he will make that ranch profitable. And if you invest now when we are desperate, you will get terms that work strongly in your favor. It is a good business opportunity." Blackwell studied her with new interest. "You are a shrewd one, are you not? All right, Mrs. Zachary, I will make you an offer. I will pay off your debt to the bank. In exchange, I want 50% ownership of the ranch and 50% of all profits for the next 10 years. After that, if you are still in business, we renegotiate." 50%, Olivia exclaimed. "That is robbery." "That is business," Blackwell corrected. "You said yourself you are desperate. I am offering you a way to keep your home. Take it or leave it." Olivia wanted to refuse on principle, but she knew she could not. "I need to discuss this with my husband," she said. "Of course," Blackwell said. "You have until Wednesday. After that, my offer expires." He touched his hat and walked back into the store. Olivia rode home with a heavy heart. When she told Tobias about the conversation, his reaction was even worse than she had feared. "No," he said flatly. "Absolutely not. I will not give up half the ranch." "But we will lose all of it if we do nothing," Olivia argued. "Then we will lose it," Tobias said stubbornly. "At least we will lose it on our own terms, not by selling out to some vulture like Blackwell." They argued about it for 2 days, voices rising in frustration and fear. It was Rosa who finally intervened, marching into the house on Tuesday evening and telling them both to sit down and listen. "You are both being fools," she said bluntly. "Tobias, your pride is blinding you. 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And Olivia, you should have talked to Tobias before making that approach. This is his family's ranch. He should have been part of the decision." She looked between them. "You are partners. You must act like partners, not opponents. Now talk to each other. Really talk with open hearts." After she left, Tobias and Olivia sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Tobias spoke. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "You were trying to help and I threw your efforts back in your face. That was not fair." "I am sorry too," Olivia said. "Rosa is right. I should have talked to you first. I was so focused on finding a solution that I forgot to include you in the process." They moved closer together and Tobias took her hand. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. "I think we should accept Blackwell's offer," Olivia said. "I know it hurts, but Rosa is right. Half of something is better than all of nothing, and who knows? Maybe in 10 years we will be profitable enough to buy him out entirely." Tobias nodded slowly. "All right, we will do it your way. But I want you with me when we sign the papers. We are partners, and we face this together." They rode to Blackwell's ranch the next morning, a sprawling operation that made Tobias's place look tiny by comparison. Blackwell met them in his office, a room lined with leather-bound books and hunting trophies. The negotiations took several hours, with Tobias insisting on provisions that would protect their interests and Blackwell pushing back on every point. But eventually, they reached an agreement. "One more thing," Tobias said as they were preparing to sign. "I want it written in the contract that if anything happens to me, Olivia retains full control of my share of the ranch. She is not to be pushed out or forced to sell." Blackwell looked at Olivia with something approaching respect. "Your husband loves you very much, Mrs. Zachary." "I know," Olivia said, meeting his gaze steadily, "and I love him. That is why we will make this work." They signed the papers, and Blackwell gave them a check to take to the bank. When they walked out of his office, Tobias was visibly tense, but Olivia felt oddly relieved. Yes, they had given up half the ranch, but they had saved it. They still had their home, their livelihood, and their future. That night, lying in Tobias's arms, Olivia said, "We are going to be all right." "I know it." "How can you be so sure?" Tobias asked. "Because we have each other," Olivia said simply. "And that is worth more than any ranch or any amount of money." Tobias kissed her forehead. "When did you become the wise one in this marriage?" "I learned from the best," Olivia replied, smiling in the darkness. The summer passed into fall, and with their financial crisis temporarily resolved, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. The partnership with Blackwell was not easy. He had strong opinions about how the ranch should be run and was not shy about sharing them. But Tobias learned to stand up for his own ideas while also being willing to listen when Blackwell's experience offered genuine value. The cattle thrived, the garden produced abundantly, and slowly but surely they began to build up reserves again. Olivia expanded her role beyond just running the household, learning about the business side of ranching. She kept meticulous records of expenses and income, finding ways to trim costs without sacrificing quality. Tobias began to rely on her judgment more and more, discussing decisions with her before acting. One October evening, as the leaves on the cottonwoods turned gold and the air carried the first real bite of coming winter, Olivia realized she had missed her monthly bleeding. Then she realized she had missed it twice. Her hand went to her stomach, and a flutter of fear and excitement ran through her. She told Tobias that night, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, and then joy broke across his features like sunlight through clouds. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby. It appears so," Olivia said, laughing at his expression. "Are you happy about it?" Instead of answering with words, Tobias picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "Olivia, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, hope for the future, and now a child. I do not know how I got so lucky." "We got lucky," Olivia corrected. "Both of us. That night in the snowstorm, when you walked into that room, my life changed. You gave me my freedom, and then you gave me your name, and then you gave me your heart. I love you, Tobias Zachary, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." "I love you too," Tobias said softly. "More than I have words to express." The winter that year was mild, and Olivia's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rosa fussed over her like a mother hen, making sure she did not work too hard and feeding her all manner of foods that were supposed to be good for growing babies. Tobias became even more protective, worrying about every little thing until Olivia had to laugh and remind him that women had been having babies since the dawn of time. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers, and on a warm April morning in 1877, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Tobias's father, and from the moment Olivia held him in her arms, she understood a kind of love she had never experienced before. Tobias cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he marveled at the tiny, perfect features. "He is beautiful," Tobias whispered. "He is perfect. He is ours," Olivia said, and that was all that mattered. Thomas grew quickly, a happy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. The ranch continued to prosper, and by the time Thomas was 2 years old, Tobias and Olivia had managed to pay down a significant portion of their obligation to Blackwell. The older man had even unbent enough to occasionally join them for dinner, charmed despite himself by young Thomas's energy and laughter. One evening when Thomas was 3, Olivia found Tobias sitting on the porch watching the sunset. She sat beside him and he put his arm around her, pulling her close. "You ever think about that night?" Tobias asked. "The night we met, all the time," Olivia admitted. "If that snowstorm had not happened, if my stepfather had not tried to sell me to Grady, if you had not walked through that door at exactly the right moment, my life would be completely different, probably terrible." "I think about it too," Tobias said. "I think about how close I came to not going to Wheatland that week. The weather was bad and I almost decided to wait. If I had, I never would have met you." "We were meant to find each other," Olivia said with certainty. "I truly believe that. Some force bigger than either of us brought us together that night." "Maybe," Tobias agreed. "Or maybe we just got very, very lucky." He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "You know, I bought your freedom that night, but Olivia, what I did not realize then was that you freed me too. I was trapped by my father's debts, by obligation and grief. You gave me a reason to fight, a reason to hope. You made me want to build a future instead of just surviving." "We built it together," Olivia said. "Everything we have, we created together." "And we are not done yet," Tobias said with a smile. "I have plans for this ranch, Olivia. Big plans. In another 5 years, we will have bought out Blackwell's share completely. We will have doubled our herd. We will have built a bigger house, one with room for more children and maybe even a real parlor where you can have your lady friends over for tea." Olivia laughed. "Lady friends? Tobias, I am a ranch wife. I do not have time for tea parties." "You could if you wanted to," Tobias said. "That is my point. I want to give you everything, Olivia. Everything you deserve and more." "You already have," Olivia said softly. "That night in the snowstorm, you gave me my life back. Everything else is just extra." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. From inside the house came the sound of Thomas's laughter as Rosa played with him before bedtime. This was home, Olivia thought. This was family. This was love, real and deep and lasting. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythm of ranch life. When Thomas was 5, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Alina and Rose, who arrived early and tiny but healthy. Tobias was beside himself with pride and terror in equal measure, convinced that something so precious and small could not possibly survive. But the girls thrived, growing into lively, curious children who followed their older brother around like devoted shadows. The ranch prospered beyond even Tobias's optimistic projections. They did indeed buy out Blackwell's share, though the old man insisted on maintaining a friendship with the family, showing up periodically to bounce the children on his knee and offer unsolicited advice about cattle management. The house was expanded, gaining a second floor and proper bedrooms for all the children, as well as a parlor that Olivia did occasionally use for entertaining, though more often it served as a playroom for the twins. Juan and Rosa's children, now grown, brought their own families to work on the ranch, and what had started as a desperate struggle for survival became a thriving multi-generational operation. Tobias became known throughout the territory as a fair but shrewd businessman, someone whose word could be trusted, and whose cattle were always top quality. But for all their success, the foundation of everything remained the partnership between Tobias and Olivia. They still made all major decisions together, still consulted each other before acting, still treated each other with the respect and care that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tobias took Olivia back to Wheatland for a rare evening away from the children. They had dinner at the small hotel restaurant, a luxury they could now afford but rarely indulged in. Afterward, they walked through the quiet streets, Olivia's hand tucked into the crook of Tobias's arm. "You remember when we walked these streets for the first time?" Tobias asked. "The night of the snowstorm. I was so frightened," Olivia recalled. "I did not know you, did not know if I could trust you. I thought you might be just another version of Harold or Grady, someone who would use me and then cast me aside. But you came with me anyway," Tobias said. "Why?" Olivia thought about that. "Because even though I was frightened, I saw something in you that night, something good and true, and I decided to take a chance on that. It was the best decision I ever made." They stopped in front of Mrs. Hannigan's boarding house and Tobias smiled. "Let us go in. I want to see if she is home." Mrs. Hannigan was delighted to see them, immediately putting the kettle on for tea and bringing out a cake she had just baked. As they sat in her warm kitchen, catching up on town gossip and sharing stories about the children, Olivia felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This woman had been one of the first to show her kindness, and that kindness had helped set the course for everything that followed. "I never properly thanked you," Olivia said impulsively. "That first night, when I had nowhere to go and no prospects, you took me in. You gave me work and dignity and a place to start over. I will never forget that." Mrs. Hannigan's eyes grew misty. "Oh, my dear girl, you do not need to thank me. Seeing you happy, seeing you thriving, that is all the thanks I need. When Tobias brought you here that night, you looked so lost and so brave all at once. I knew then you were someone special. I am just glad I could play a small part in your story." Later, as they drove home under a sky full of stars, Olivia leaned her head on Tobias's shoulder. "Do you think Thomas will remember all this when he grows up? The children, I mean. Do you think they will remember how hard we worked to build this life?" "I do not know," Tobias said honestly, "but I hope they will remember that they were loved, that their parents loved each other and loved them, and that we built something good together. That is the legacy that matters." "You are right," Olivia said. "Love is the legacy. Everything else is just details." The years continued their steady march. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man who had his father's work ethic and his mother's sharp mind. The twins became beautiful, spirited girls who could ride as well as any cowboy and were not afraid to speak their minds. Tobias and Olivia watched their children grow with pride and occasional bewilderment at how quickly time seemed to pass. When Thomas was 18, he fell in love with a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. Tobias and Olivia gave their blessing, recognizing in the young couple the same kind of partnership they had built. The wedding was held at the ranch, with half the territory in attendance, and Olivia cried happy tears as she watched her son start his own journey. "We are getting old," she said to Tobias that night as they lay in bed, exhausted from the festivities. "Speak for yourself," Tobias replied. "I am in the prime of my life." Olivia laughed and poked him in the ribs. "You have gray in your beard, old man." "Dignified silver," Tobias corrected. "It comes from years of wisdom and hard work." He turned serious, taking her hand. "But you are right. We are not the young people we were when we met. I am 45 now and you are 40. By some standards, that is middle-aged." "It does not feel that way," Olivia said. "I still feel like that frightened girl sometimes, the one who did not know what the future held." "But now you do know," Tobias said. "You know that whatever comes, we will face it together. That has not changed." 2 years later, the twins married in a double ceremony that was the social event of the season. Alina married a banker's son from Cheyenne, and Rose married a young lawyer with political ambitions. Both were love matches, both clearly partnerships built on mutual respect and affection. Tobias and Olivia gave each of their daughters a generous dowry and their blessing to build whatever lives they chose. After the weddings, the house seemed suddenly very quiet. For the first time in 23 years, Tobias and Olivia were alone together, the children grown and gone. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for decades. "Whatever we want," Tobias replied. "We have worked hard for all these years. Maybe it is time to enjoy the fruits of that labor." And so they did. They traveled, something they had never had time for before. They went to Denver and San Francisco, marveling at how much the world had changed since they were young. They hosted their children and growing number of grandchildren, the house filling with noise and laughter during holidays and summers. They continued to run the ranch, but with less intensity now, trusting the capable hands of the next generation to carry much of the load. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Tobias surprised Olivia with a trip back to Nebraska, to the site of her father's old farm. The land had been sold long ago and was now part of a larger operation, but they were able to walk the fields where Olivia had played as a child. "I used to think I had lost everything when my father died," Olivia said, standing in the middle of what had once been a wheat field. "My home, my security, my future. But now I see that I did not lose anything. I just had to let go of one life so I could build another better one." "Do you have any regrets?" Tobias asked. Olivia thought about that, really considered it. No, she said finally, not a single one. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear and uncertainty led me to you and to the life we built. I would not change any of it. They returned to Wyoming with a sense of completion, of circles closing and peace settling. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, with his sisters visiting regularly and contributing their own ideas and energy. The second generation was proving just as capable and determined as the first. One winter evening, when they were both in their 60s, a snowstorm blew in from the north, heavy and fierce. Olivia stood at the window watching the snow fall, and Tobias came to stand beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Reminds you of that night, does it not?" he said quietly. "Every snowstorm does," Olivia admitted. "But especially the big ones like this. I think about how different my life would have been if you had not walked through that door. If you had been even an hour later, Grady would have taken me away, and I do not think I would have survived what he had planned." "But I was not late," Tobias said firmly. "I was exactly on time. We found each other when we needed to, and we built something beautiful together." Olivia turned from the window to look at her husband. His hair was completely gray now and lines marked his face, but his blue eyes were still as clear and kind as they had been the first night she met him. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "You gave me everything," she said. "Your name, your protection, your love, your life. You made me feel safe and valued and cherished. You gave me children and a home and a purpose. How can I ever thank you for all of that? You gave me the same," Tobias replied. "We saved each other, Olivia. That is the truth of it. I bought your freedom, yes, but you freed me too. From loneliness, from despair, from a life half lived. We were both lost until we found each other." They stood together at the window, watching the snow fall and remembering all the years that had passed since that first fateful storm. The house around them was quiet now, but it was a comfortable quiet, full of memories and love. "Tell me again," Olivia said softly. "Tell me the story of the night we met." Tobias smiled, because she asked him this every time there was a big snowstorm. And every time he told her, adding new details and perspectives shaped by the passage of time. "It was a bitter February evening in 1876, he began, "and the snow was falling so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face. I was riding into Wheatland to collect a debt, thinking about how cold I was and how much I wanted to be home by a warm fire. I had no idea that my entire life was about to change." "What made you go to that particular building?" Olivia asked, though she knew the answer. "The saloon keeper told me that was where I would find Harold Jensen," Tobias said. "I remember climbing those stairs, hearing voices raised in argument. When I opened the door, I saw three people. A weak, greedy man selling something precious for money he did not deserve. A cruel man looking to buy something that should never be for sale. And a young woman standing straight and proud despite her fear, refusing to be broken by circumstances that would have destroyed most people." "I was so frightened," Olivia murmured. "But you did not show it," Tobias said. "Not really. You stood your ground. You spoke your truth. And when I looked at you, I knew immediately that you were someone worth fighting for. I did not love you then, not yet. But I saw your strength and your dignity, and I knew I could not let those men destroy you." "And then you lied about how much money Harold owed," Olivia said with a smile. "I did," Tobias agreed without shame. "It was the best lie I ever told, because it gave me the leverage I needed to get you out of there safely. And then you brought me here to this house, to this ranch." Olivia continued the familiar story. "You gave me your name and a place to belong. You gave me time to heal and space to grow. And somewhere along the way, you gave me your heart. And you gave me yours, Tobias said. "The best trade I ever made." They moved away from the window and settled by the fire, Tobias in his favorite chair and Olivia on the footstool beside him, her head resting against his knee. His hand moved gently through her hair, now gray but still thick and soft. "We have had a good life," Olivia said contentedly. "The best," Tobias agreed. "3 wonderful children, 8 grandchildren so far, and a ranch that will support the family for generations to come." "But you know what I am most proud of?" "What?" Olivia asked. "That through all of it, through every challenge and triumph, every joy and sorrow, we stayed partners," Tobias said. "We kept our promise to each other, honesty always, respect always, love always. That is what I am most proud of." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you," she said. "Just as much today as I did the day I realized I had fallen for you. More, actually. Love has deepened with time." "I love you too," Tobias said. "You were sold during a snowstorm, but I did not buy you, Olivia. You were never property to be owned. I bought your freedom, and in return, you gave me mine. We chose each other, every day for more than 30 years, and I would make that choice again without hesitation." The storm outside raged on, but inside the house was warm and safe and full of love. They sat together by the fire, 2 people who had found each other in the midst of a snowstorm and had built a life beyond anything either could have imagined. The cowboy who had given her his name had given her so much more. He had given her a future, a family, and a love that would last forever. Years continued to pass gently. Tobias and Olivia grew old together, still partners in every sense of the word. When they were both in their early 70s, Thomas took over full management of the ranch, though his parents still lived in the main house and offered advice when asked. The house was frequently full of visiting children and grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren too. Olivia loved watching the youngest generation play in the same fields where she had raised her own children, loved seeing the ranch her husband had fought so hard to preserve continuing to thrive. One spring morning, when the wildflowers were blooming and the air was sweet with the promise of new life, Olivia woke to find Tobias still sleeping beside her. His breathing was peaceful and steady, his face relaxed. She lay there watching him, this man who had been her partner and lover and best friend for over 40 years now. When he finally opened his eyes, he smiled at her. "Good morning, beautiful." "Good morning, handsome," Olivia replied, using their familiar endearments. "How are you feeling?" "Old," Tobias said with a rueful smile, "but happy. Very, very happy." They spent the day as they spent most days now, quietly, peacefully, enjoying each other's company and the beauty of the land around them. They took a short walk in the afternoon, moving slowly but steadily, pointing out the first signs of spring growth to each other. That evening, sitting on the porch watching another sunset, Tobias took Olivia's hand. "I want you to know something," he said seriously. "If I go first, I do not want you to mourn too hard or too long. I want you to remember all the joy we had, not the sadness of the ending. Can you promise me that? You are not going anywhere," Olivia said firmly, though her heart clenched at the thought. "We are both over 70, my love," Tobias said gently. "We have to face reality. One of us will go first, and the other will have to learn to live with that loss. I just want you to know that if I am the first, I will go grateful for every moment we had together. No regrets, only gratitude." Olivia squeezed his hand tightly. "The same is true for me," she said. "But let us not dwell on endings tonight. Let us think about everything we have built and all the love that surrounds us." As if summoned by her words, Thomas appeared on the porch carrying his youngest son, a 2-year-old with his grandfather's blue eyes. "Little Tobias wants to say good night to his grandparents," Thomas said, settling the boy on his grandfather's lap. Tobias's face lit up as he looked at his namesake. The child reached up with chubby hands and patted his grandfather's weathered cheeks, and Olivia felt her heart overflow with love. This was legacy, she thought. This was what they had built. Not just a ranch or a fortune, but a family, generation after generation learning to love and work and build together. After Thomas took the sleepy child to bed, Tobias and Olivia remained on the porch a while longer. The stars came out one by one, brilliant against the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. "You remember," Olivia said softly, "how I used to be afraid of the coyotes when I first came here." "And now you barely notice them," Tobias said. "You have come a long way from that frightened girl in Wheatland." "We both have," Olivia replied. "We have come a long way together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars emerge. In that moment, with the ranch settled quiet around them and their family safe in their beds, everything felt perfect, complete, like the ending of a very long story, one that had begun in fear and desperation but had transformed into something beautiful and true. "She was sold during a snowstorm," Tobias murmured as if to himself. "And a cowboy bought her freedom and gave her his name. And she gave him her heart," Olivia added, "and together they built a life worth living." "The best life," Tobias agreed. "No regrets, no regrets," Olivia echoed. "Only love, always love." The night deepened around them, but they remained on the porch, neither willing to break the spell of the moment. Eventually, the cold drove them inside and they climbed the stairs to their bedroom hand in hand, as they had done countless times over the decades. As Olivia drifted off to sleep that night, wrapped in Tobias's arms, her last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. Against all odds, against every expectation, she had found not just survival but genuine happiness. She had found home, family, purpose, and love. The cowboy who had walked into that room during a snowstorm 40 years ago had not just bought her freedom. He had given her everything that made life worth living. And so they lived out their days in peace and contentment, surrounded by the family they had created and the land they had nurtured. When Tobias finally passed away at the age of 78, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Olivia beside him. She mourned him deeply but not despairingly, remembering his words about gratitude rather than regret. Olivia lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the early days of the ranch. She told them about the snowstorm that had brought her and Tobias together, about the courage it had taken to start over, about the partnership they had built based on mutual respect and growing love. On a quiet evening in early spring, very much like the day when she and Tobias had last talked about endings, Olivia passed away peacefully in the same bed where she had slept beside her husband for over 4 decades. Her last words were reported to be a whisper. "I am coming, my love. Wait for me." She was laid to rest beside Tobias on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a stone that read, "Olivia Jensen Zachary, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She was given freedom and gave love in return." Next to it, Tobias's stone read, "Tobias Zachary, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He gave his name and found his heart." The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management and eventually under his children's care. But they never forgot the story of how it all began. With a snowstorm, a desperate girl, a courageous cowboy, and a decision to take a chance on each other that had changed everything. It became family legend, passed down through the generations, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the hardest moments, and that love, real love, can transform everything. And so the legacy of Tobias and Olivia Zachary lived on, not just in the land and the buildings and the cattle, but in the values they had embodied: courage, honesty, partnership, and above all, love. They had started with nothing but a desperate need and a willingness to trust. And from that improbable beginning, they had built something that would last for generations. The cowboy had bought her freedom during a snowstorm, given her his name, and in return, she had given him everything that mattered. Together, they had created a life of meaning and purpose, and their love story became the foundation upon which an entire family legacy was built.